Okay, good morning, everybody, on our last day. I hope you slept
morning.
well.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
Very good. Very good.
Good
And I
morning.
hope you all read the Heart Sutra.
Yes.
How many people read the Heart Sutra? Raise your hands. Okay, not everybody, but some. Oh, now Larry has a different photograph behind him. That's very nice. Where's that, Larry?
Harriman. It's the AMC lodge there.
Uh-huh.
Mountain Club. So they have a lounge lodge there where they have catering and cabins and stuff.
Uh-huh. Very nice. Okay. Well, as I said, today's the last day. And what I'm going to do is begin by sort of jumping into the past, into the past, to help understand where the Heart Sutra and other Prajnaparamita texts are coming from. Let me jump back into the Buddhist history to give you a background note on the Sarvastivada school. The Sarvastivada was one of the earliest and most prominent Shravakayana or Hinayana schools. It existed, it's now defunct, but it existed from about the 3rd century before the Common Era to the 7th century in the Common Era. And it was one of the most influential Buddhist monastic groups, if not the most influential, and flourished throughout northern India, especially in Kashmir. It was also prominent in Central Asia. Some people think that the Shravakayana or Hinayana schools were always in the south, but that's not true. The Sarvastivada, for example, moved up into Central Asia along the Silk Road. Why do I mention the Sarvastivada? I mention it because it was particularly known for its Abhidharma teaching. And I think everybody here knows what Abhidharma or Abhidharma is. It is the 3rd basket of the 3 baskets, say, of the Theravada school as an example. And it is a highly abstract articulation of the teachings of the Buddha down into great detail. It's very complex. And if you want to learn more about it, you can take Bhikkhu Bodhi's course on the Abhidharma. Well, they were known, the Sarvastivadins, for Abhidharma, but their Abhidharma was different than the Theravadins. What is important about this Abhidharma, the Sarvastivadin Abhidharma, can be seen in the meaning of the name Sarvastivada. Most scholars agree that the name Sarvastivada can be divided into three parts. First part, sarva, which means all or every. Middle part, asti, which means exist, and vada, speak, say, or theory. Put together, they mean the sect that speaks about, talks about the existence. Larry, you muted me. Maybe there's noble silence. Okay. I don't know. What's the last thing you heard that I said?
The Sarvastivada, the definition of the meaning
Okay.
they speak about or
that, Michael?
exist.
All right. So that is to say, on the one hand, the Sarvastivadins agreed with almost all the other Buddhists that there is no permanent self, that the no self or anatta anatman doctrine is true. They agreed on that. On the other hand, however, the Sarvastivadins asserted that the constituents of the self and other things in the universe do actually exist. That phenomena in this sense are real and permanent, because reality here means permanence. Permanent means real. You can visualize this as permanent atoms kind of separating and combining to make people and things, the furniture of the universe. The self is not real, but the constituents or the elements of the self are real. Most scholars believe that the Mahayana doctrine of emptiness, sunyata, and the Prajnaparamita Sutras are the reaction to the Sarvastivadin teachings, that phenomena or their constituents are real. The Heart Sutra bluntly contradicts this position when it states right up front, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. The Heart Sutra is thus a short Mahayana teaching of the Two Truths doctrine that states that ultimately everything, all phenomena, are empty of an unchanging essence, an inherent essence, inherent existence, unchanging phenomena. This emptiness is a characteristic of all phenomena, and it is not a transcendent reality. It is also empty of an essence of its own. This teaching was then philosophically developed by the famous Nagarjuna, and it became fundamental to the Mahayana tradition. Okay, now let's look at the sutra, the sections of the sutra. Let's start with the name, Mahaprajnaparamita Sutra, or the Hridaya Mahaprajnaparamita Sutra. Looking at the name of the sutra, Prajna is usually translated as wisdom. However, British Buddhist scholar Damien Cowan says Prajna is closer in meaning to insight, to non-discriminating knowledge, or intuitive apprehension. Jna can be translated as consciousness, knowledge, or understanding. Pra can be rendered as higher, greater, supreme, premium, or according to David Loy, being born or springing up, referring to a spontaneous type of knowledge. Prajna is not intellectual or conceptual knowledge. It is not book knowledge. It is not received knowledge. Somebody's waiting to come in. Different people divide the sutra into sections in different ways. Here is one scheme that I use. It is different from others, such as Red Pines in his book, The Heart Sutra, The Womb of the Buddhas. I should note that his subtitle, The Womb of the Buddhas, comes from the Mahayanists calling Prajnaparamita the mother of the Buddhas. The first paragraph tells us about Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Avalokiteshvara is the speaker of the sutra, and it also introduces in the first paragraph the subject. This is important because it thereby relates compassion to wisdom, something that I mentioned several days ago. The second paragraph states the main thesis. The third paragraph applies emptiness to the classical Buddhist teachings of the 5 aggregates, Upadana Kanda, Panchakanda, the 12 bases, Ayatana, the dependent origination in truncated form, Paticca Samuppada, and the 4 noble truths, Chattari Arya Satchani, and to enlightenment and its lack. By the way, not every Heart Sutra includes the no non-attainment in this paragraph. The 4th paragraph applies emptiness to bodhisattvas and practice. And there is an important point made here in my understanding. We'll get to that. The 5th paragraph applies emptiness to the Buddhas. The 6th is an exhortation, affirmation, and instruction. The sutra wraps it up with a mantra. Let's go back to that first paragraph. The speaker is, of course, Avalokiteshvara. Who is Avalokiteshvara? Chapter 25 of the Lotus Sutra seems to be the earliest source for information about Avalokiteshvara, and the chapter is devoted to him. It describes him as a compassionate bodhisattva who hears the cries of sentient beings and who works tirelessly to help those who call upon his name. The Lotus Sutra chapter describes 33 different manifestations of Avalokiteshvara, including female manifestations, all to suit the minds of various beings. The paragraph notes that deep meditation on the emptiness of the aggregates liberated Avalokiteshvara. Regarding Avalokiteshvara's role in this sutra, Karl Brunholz, author of the Heart Attack Sutra, wrote the following in his book. Why is it called the Heart Sutra? It has that name because it teaches the heart of Mahayana, primarily in terms of view. However, the basic motivation of the Mahayana is also implicitly contained in this sutra in the form of Avalokiteshvara, the great bodhisattva who is the embodiment of the loving kindness and compassion of all Buddhas. It is actually the only Prajnaparamita Sutra in which Avalokiteshvara appears at all. And in it, he is even the main speaker. Thus, the Heart Sutra teaches emptiness through the epitome of compassion. It is often said that, in a sense, emptiness is the heart of the Mahayana, but the heart of emptiness is compassion. It is often said that, no, I did that. The scriptures even use the phrase emptiness with a heart of compassion. It is crucial to never forget that the main reason for Avalokiteshvara's presence here is to symbolize the aspect of compassion and to emphasize that we should not miss out on it. If we just read all the no's, and the sutra goes, not this, not that, no, 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 no. If we just read all the no's and then get hooked on no path of no self and no attainment, it gets a little dreary and depressing. Somebody else wants in. And we may wonder, why are we doing this? Why are we not doing this? In fact, the heart essence of the Prajnaparamita teachings and the Mahayana is the union of emptiness and compassion, the two parts. If we look at the larger Prajnaparamita sutras, we see that they teach both aspects extensively. That's paragraph 1. Paragraph 2 introduces Sariputra. Who was Sariputra? Does somebody want to tell me who Sariputra was? Some of you should know who Sariputra was. Anybody?
Most wise disciple of Buddha.
Okay, wise disciple of Buddha. Does somebody have more?
He was one of the Buddha's true most, I guess, closest disciples and most important. I believe he was called Marshal of the Dharma.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody?
From my understanding,
go ahead.
Yeah, from my understanding, he was very wise. Like, he knew the right things, but he just didn't. I don't know if he was able to apply them or he just wasn't able to fully understand them. Like, I feel like that was part of his thing. I'm not sure if that's correct.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, you all have points about Sariputra, and basically that's all part of it. Sariputra was one of the major disciples of the Buddha, as you said, and he was considered the first of the Buddha's two chief disciples, together with his cousin Moggallana. So very often what you'll do is you'll find some statues in some countries, and there'll be the Buddha in the middle, and there'll be Sariputta on one side and Moggallana on the other side. That would be in some Theravada temples. So you see the two of them, the two chief disciples. Sariputra had a key leadership role in the ministry of the Buddha, and is considered in many Buddhist schools to have been important in the development of the Buddhist Abhidharma. So he becomes identified with the Sarvastivada Abhidharma, the Theravada Abhidharma. He becomes associated with it. And this goes through history. He frequently appears in the Mahayana Sutras, and in some sutras is used as the counterpoint to represent the Shravakayana or Hinayana branch of Buddhism. In other words, he plays the role as the representative of the Sarvastivada Abhidharma. Okay, hold on, I have a cat in trouble. Okay, I think you might know the saying, dogs have owners and cats have staffers. I'm a cat staffer. He is the representative of the intellectual side of Hinayana. In other words, he is the brainy Theravada Buddhist. He is associated with being a brainy guy. Intellectually brainy, not intuitively brainy. Sariputta plays a major role in the Heart Sutra, where the teaching is directed at him. The paragraph goes on to state the main idea of the sutra, emptiness. As you know, the Nikayas and the Agamas, in the Nikayas and the Agamas, the Buddha stresses dependent origination. And his pithiest statement of it is, imasming sati idang hoti, imas upada idang upajati, imasming asata idang nahoti, imas niroda idang nirujati. This being, that becomes, from the arising of this, that arises, this not being, that does not become, from the cessation of this, that ceases. That is the essence of dependent origination in one verse. Now, the great expositor of the doctrine of emptiness, the Venerable Nagarjuna, who lived about 150 to 100, 150 Common Era, Nagarjuna similarly succinctly summarized emptiness. And he has two verses in his magnum opus that go like, whatever is dependently co-arisen, that is explained to be emptiness. That, being a dependent designation, is itself the middle way. Something that is not dependently arisen, such a thing does not exist. Therefore, a non-empty thing does not exist. That's rather abstract. But the point is that everything that arises from the point of view of emptiness, everything that arises arises in dependence. And because it arises in dependence, it has no inherent existence. Everything is empty. If you want more on emptiness, I recommend a book by Guy Newland called Introduction to Emptiness. It's not long, but it's very, very good in terms of introducing the concept of emptiness. In paragraph 3, Avalokiteshvara then applies emptiness to everything. Everything across the board. It is important to remember that he is not really saying these things don't exist. Rather, he is saying they exist dependently, relatively. They exist without an unchanging essence, without inherent existence, without independent being. Nothing exists in and of itself. Everything exists in relation to other things. Paragraphs 2 and 3 are the wisdom section of the sutra. Any questions about that part of the sutra? I should actually try to get this up. Let me see if I can share a screen. All right, can you see it? I don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So there we have the first part of the sutra is the title. And then we have the first paragraph where Avalokiteshvara becomes awakened from practicing the profound perfection of wisdom. And then we have Sariputra. He addresses Sariputra. Here is an emphatic thing. It's Ida in Sanskrit. Some translators include it. Some translators don't include it. Some translate it as O Sariputra. Then we have the basic assertion, the basic wisdom. And then Sariputra goes down through the different parts that are classical Buddhist elements of teaching in terms of the 5 khanda. And then, of course, he does the bases. Then he does the paticca samuppada, dependent origination. All that is in the red. Then he says no ignorance, no cessation of ignorance. All that is in blue, the 4 noble truths. And then he gets into what would be a summary of the dependent origination. And then he gets down to there is no such thing as attainment. And finally, we get into the next paragraph. Because there's nothing to attain, bodhisattvas depend on the perfection of wisdom. Consequently, their minds are without hindrances or obstacles. Because they have no hindrances, they have no fears. Leaving behind distorted views and dreamlike perceptions, they finally attain nirvana. So here we are in the 4th paragraph where Avalokiteshvara connects emptiness with practice. Regarding this part of the sutra, the late master Shangyan notes in his book, There Is No Suffering, a commentary on the Heart Sutra, when the mind has problems, there will be obstructions or hindrances. And when there are obstructions, there will be fears, such as the fear of losing what you have, or the fear of not getting what you want. This fear refers to the kind of basic anxiety associated with the givens of our existence. People fear the known as well as the unknown, and they fear the future as well as the past. As long as we have self-attachment, these existential anxieties exist for us. We have anxiety because we feel threatened by our circumstances, whether it is our health, our security, our ideas, our perceptions, our feelings, or any number of things. We see ourselves as being permanent, but we must come to realize that everything about ourselves is transient, constantly changing. The first order of business is to acknowledge and identify our fears. Of course, if we were to eliminate our self-centeredness, all fears would disappear. To truly have no fear, you must meditate and eventually experience the emptiness of self and the 5 khandhas or aggregates, skandhas. So this paragraph connects the bodhisattva's wisdom with the absence of fears, which comes from the absence of hindrances. which is part of being able to act in compassion. When you have done as Master Shangyan said, your obstacles and hindrances will drop off, and thus will your fears. Eventually, nirvana will happen. However, for bodhisattvas, there is work to do. Work to alleviate the suffering of others. Work because they have the transcendental wisdom of prajna. Bodhisattvas can penetrate beyond shallow appearances to see genuine suffering and need, and they cannot be emotionally shaken by the often horrendous facts of others' suffering. Prajna paramita wisdom enables one to be sensitive to and to be able to face the often gruesome and horrific suffering of others and help do something about it. This is of great value, for example, in this pandemic time. There's an important point that the sutra is implying here, and that is that we often associate bodhisattvas with having an empathetic or empathic understanding of one another person's suffering. But empathy and compassion are not exactly the same. For example, what is empathy? Can somebody tell me what empathy is? Nobody.
Feel other people's emotions.
It's to, yes, it is feeling other people's emotions to feel as they feel. For example, we have every summer in this country, I imagine in other countries, and it happened in the Washington suburbs just last week, where a parent left a child, a baby, in the car, locked all day long, in a hot car, and of course, came back from work, got in the car and discovered their child was dead. This is a heartbreaking thing. And so it is easy for someone to have empathy to feel that heartbreak. But very often, if you have empathy and you have too much empathy, you get exhausted from being able to share those feelings. And very often those feelings prevent you from acting clearly and compassionately. So the bodhisattva understands the suffering of the other person. They don't have any obstacles, they don't have that feeling interference, that hindrance, and can act to alleviate suffering without becoming emotionally involved or exhausted from emotions. Paragraph 5 says, then in the past, present, and future, all Buddhas depend on the perfection of wisdom. For this reason, they attain complete, perfect enlightenment. Therefore, is relating the perfection of wisdom to the Buddhas and the final goal of complete, perfect enlightenment. Then we get down, therefore know that the perfection of wisdom is the great mantra, luminous mantra, unsurpassed mantra, unequaled mantra that can remove all suffering. This is true, not false. So recite the perfection of wisdom mantra that is, recite the mantra that says, and then it gives the mantra. This paragraph, the last paragraph, esteems the sutra and its perfection of wisdom by using superlatives and asserting the truth. This is a characteristic of Mahayana sutras. Something to say, this is true, not false, is something that you find in many Mahayana sutras. Finally, the mantra is aspirational. In translation, it can be read as gone, gone, gone beyond, gone far beyond, awakening, hail. There are various translations of the mantra. Master Shangyan concludes his commentary on the sutra with the following. As Buddhists, we should view this entire sutra as the mantra of wisdom and power. When we recite the Heart Sutra every day, we immerse ourselves in the core teaching of Buddhism. the sutra shows us the way to leave behind affliction and illusion, and to give birth to genuine compassion. It is a pure path of our own awakening to Buddhahood. I recommend the recitation of this sutra in whatever form or language you choose. Then it can begin to sink in and affect your life. Remember what the Buddha said in the simile of the snake, the simile of the snake sutta, where he had two similes, the snake and then of the raft. His teachings are for application and not for debate and disputation. Actually, if somebody turns his, according to the Buddhist understanding, if somebody uses his teachings for philosophical debate and disputation, you can actually cause yourself great harm because you can become entangled in intellectual and sometimes emotional disputation, which can even get you more involved in the cycle of rebirth. I've been asked to for a list of both of the Heart Sutra books that I have, so I'll type up that list and send that to Faye later today. And if you're interested in that, you can contact her. So I hope that a brief visit to this Buddha Sutra, as well as to the two Theravada Sutras that I gave you, has been of some value to you and perhaps motivated you to do your own study. There are riches to be found, but we have to put in the effort. Buddhist scriptures come from different times and places than our modern 21st century world, but discovering their world is one of the enjoyments. Please remember that sutras aren't quick, novel-like reads. They take time in their teachings, and if they are to sink in. They take some tolerance of alien styles. Above all, they are for practice and your transformation. So that is what I had to say formally about the Heart Sutra. So I thought we would use some time for questions and discussion. Do you have some questions about this sutra or anything else?
Excuse me, Michael, there's two things that I'd like to ask that you repeat. So one of the last things you said was we should view the whole sutra as the mantra of something and power. What was the something?
Hold on. Compassion and power, I think it was. Okay, mantra of wisdom and power.
Thank you. And then the second thing was, can you give us the breakdown of the word Sarvastivada again, please?
Okay, Sar, it starts with, hold on, I've got to get back to that part. Sarvastivada means those who speak about things that exist. First of all, sarva, S-A-R-V-A, is all or every.
Right.
And then to that you add asti, A-S-T-I, exist. And then to that you add vada, which is V-A-D-A, which means say or speak.
Thank you.
So it means those who speak about the reality of phenomena. This is the Sarvastivada and the Theravada are the only two early Buddhist schools where we have a complete Abhidharma. And when the Mahayanas are talking about Abhidharma, it's important to remember they're talking about the Sarvastivada Abhidharma. They're not talking about the Theravada Abhidharma. The Theravada Abhidharma, which I'm sure you know from Bhikkhu Bodhi's course, does not assert that the constituents of existence have an unchanging permanent reality, that they are real. The Theravada Abhidharma never made that claim. By this time, the Sthaviravada, later became the Theravada, also known as the Vijnana Vada, the analysts. This school had disappeared from most of the Indian subcontinent. They were located only in the far south of India, what we now call Tamil Nadu, and in Sri Lanka. They were not in the rest of India, so they were not players in the debates.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Oh, Michael, could you translate the mantra that says Gate, Gate, Paragate?
Okay, Gate, the first one means gone. So you've got two gone, gone, gone.
Uh-huh.
Then Paragate, gone beyond. Then Parasamgate, gone far beyond. Bodhi can be enlightenment, awakening, whatever you want. Swaha is a Sanskrit and Pali word that means something like hail. It's an expression of enthusiasm. So you could actually put a exclamation mark behind it. Now there are others who translate that differently, but this is the early translation, and I think it's still quite accurate, that I got from Edward Conze's translations. This refers to, and when you understand the mantra that way, you understand that it's pertaining to prajna paramita as the wisdom gone beyond, paramita as something that goes beyond transcendence. Remember what I had said earlier, perfection of wisdom, the word perfection is not exactly correct because paramita refers to something that takes you beyond. It's transcendental, transcendent. So this particular mantra relates to that, going beyond, something that takes one beyond to the other shore, to nirvana, transcendence.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you
Yes.
tell? Hello?
Yes.
Could you tell, what is your view with, like, regard to the Heart Sutra in today's, our existence with today and the riots and all the stuff going on in the United States? Like, how do you, let's say, you know, everything is empty, things are always changing, it's conditions, and how do you maintain or even cultivate compassion on a regular basis when you're faced with things that arise your hindrances, you know, such as maybe ill will or aversion, you know, like really mixing it up when there's such hostility around?
Well, there are different practices you can do. One of the first ones, if you don't have a good meditation practice, then I would suggest that you begin with some kind of a devotional practice to calm yourself down. Then what you want to do is try to understand the causes and conditions of what is happening. A lot of people get very emotionally wound up with this. So I would also say start using some mindfulness. Do you do mindfulness?
I hold on to this stuff like a life preserver or a surfboard, okay?
Yeah.
When it begins for me to, especially as things escalate in the workplace and so forth, it's almost as if there's a divide between Buddhist living or application of all the teachings, or at least understanding them in action, and existing in a time in the same time with the world, instead of watching the world like you're in a movie. Like you really lose your participation in it when you hang on to all the teachings and so forth. You know what I mean? Almost separate. Mm-hmm. You're looking at it from a different perspective, but it's still to cultivate compassion, what we're just talking about, the compassion and the empathy. Compassion, yeah, but the empathy, I don't really understand all the violence.
Well, the empathy, in this case, what Buddhism is advising and the Bodhisattva would follow is not empathy in the classic sense of feeling another's feelings. It's closer to sympathy. And it is understanding without getting emotionally entangled. Some people, I know several people in my own retirement community who are very concerned about different events and different affairs. But when they start talking about some of the current things that are happening, not to mention the politics, they get emotionally choked up, and it stops them right there from being able to think clearly and look clearly. That's why I recommend, above all, starting with some mindfulness practice. Starting with breathing is a good way to do it. But if you can't sit, can you sit still and do breathing practice, mindfulness of breathing?
Yeah, every day I got to practice. I do my morning, and I do like 40-20, sit 40,
Yeah.
walk 20.
Yeah.
And I study Dharma, and then I go but it definitely doesn't feel so integrated when I'm in the mix. If I go into the workplace, because we're not sheltering, we're in it. And so it's definitely, it's almost, it's hard it stays in your heart, but then you have a shell when you're with the other folks. You're not really with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's
I'm sorry, what is it that you do?
I work for a municipality, but it doesn't matter exactly. We never shut down. We always continue to work, and the place is real political and so forth, but it doesn't matter. It's the fact that when I'm with others and I keep my Buddhist studies, there's a definite separation in perspective and mindset. And it's almost like a detachment, like not really in the whole situation. And it's very scary. You're going to go into Manhattan and throwing rocks and bottles and every other kind of thing. And you look at it and I have a hard time really finding compassion for it. It's insane. It's an insane view. The whole thing is crazy.
Yeah,
So
I was in Hingham that happened. In Hingham, I was taking a turn where I had right away, and you have stop sign, and a guy screamed at me. So it can be anywhere.
Yeah. And you got to think empathy, compassion, and real wisdom. What is the wisdom in this situation? That's what I'm thinking, because there's so much of it.
Well, there is so much of it. What I would recommend is, let me go back to this where you say you don't think you're part of it
Right.
in the workplace. Can you give me some more information about exactly what that means? Does that mean you feel as though you don't get as excited and involved as others, and therefore you're not part of the group? Or,
no, it's not. I'm not part of the group, that's for sure. In terms of the agreeing or disagreeing, I'm not so caught. My ideas about opinions.
Yeah.
I would kind of like to. If I was the queen, and I know this is an opinion itself, but I think we should outlaw opinions. There should be no more opinions. Let's just not have opinions for a day, and then we could maybe have a little bit of space. But it becomes real congested with various opinions, and I really don't feel a part of that. I'm waiting for everybody to finish with their opinions, and then we can maybe make some kind of space. I don't feel the empathy, what you were talking, I don't really feel empathy and compassion.
You don't have to feel, okay, I wasn't promoting empathy in the classic sense of feeling another's feelings. The point was that the wisdom is different from classical empathy. It is more like a sympathy, all right? Because you're not getting emotionally involved. When you get emotionally involved, by which I don't mean loving kindness and that kind of thing, but classic emotions that afflict us. When you get involved that way, then you get yourself entangled and you get yourself blocked, and you can't act wisely and clearly, and you make mistakes, and then you get involved in arguments, disputations, the kind of thing that's been going on lately. People become hot-headed, and things can get worse. Things often get worse. So you don't really want to do that. What you want to do is basically, if you can maintain some degree of equanimity, calmness through various practices, then basically just try to understand what is going on with the people who are getting emotionally involved and arguing. What are the causes and conditions for the situation? But don't participate. You don't want to participate in that.
Right.
We had here on this retirement community, it's where I live is a very nice place to live. And one of the characteristics, we have about 300 people, residents, in both independent living and assisted living and a nursing home, all that kind of stuff. And people get along very well. One of the things that's good about it is everybody is really quite nice and quite friendly, but along comes politics. And we had one person put up a particularly very large flag for one particular candidate, which set the others off. And we have it so now that no political signs are being put up anywhere. And we were able to explain that we can't do that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it worked, and it diffused the situation.
Can I add?
Yeah.
I just want to say to Anne-Marie is that I think a lot of us are in the same situation, that she's not alone in her predicament, so to speak, of trying to, you know, having a certain inside, what goes inside of us, and how different it is from the outside, and how difficult it is to maintain with what is surrounding us, and how people are acting and how things are going. So I want to empathize and sympathize with her, and let her know that she's not alone, that this is unfortunately the current situation of the whole country. I am not in Manhattan. I'm not even I'm blessed to be in a rural area. However, obviously, you always have to venture into civilization, whether shopping, whether going to see a doctor or what have you. So you've always been faced, you know, with certain things that you can't shut out. Like what happened in your retirement community with the sign, you know, I drive this road that I always have to drive, and there's a sign of a particular candidate again that is in your face, and no matter what I do, I'm always looking at it. So I just had to make peace with it, you know. It is what it is. It is the current situation, and we have to just try to rise above it with our practice and what we do and how we think, and not allow the situation to take us down. You know, we're not above other people, but we have to maintain who we are. Hopefully that helped you, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, well, one thing that you can do is note your own reactions when these kind of things start to happen, like you were just describing the sign. What your own reaction is, note that arising. And stop and be mindful for just a few minutes or just a few seconds. Take a few deep breaths and then let it go. Eventually you'll stop reacting to it that way.
Absolutely. You know, the more you stress it, the more it bothers you, and the less you do, you know, you just let it go, and it stops being something, a thorn in your side, so to speak.
It just depends on what kind of thing you're doing too. Where I'm working, there's always the thorn in your sides. The tendency is people dying is really fast. I've had 6 cases of dying already, but I've been exposed to COVID, but I tested negative. And the 4 days when I was waiting for the result of my test were the worst time in my life.
Can I just
Okay.
add to that? Sorry.
Yeah, another question?
No, just to remind Anne-Marie, when we're talking about the Buddha's teachings, there's always 2 aspects. There's the aspect of learning the principles, and then the aspect of applying them. Learning them is relatively easy, but applying them is the harder thing. And every time you hear a teacher tell you to just keep practicing, it's focusing on that aspect, because it's like you have the recipe to make a cake, but can you actually make that cake? So to actually be able to make that cake and make it so that everyone says, wow, that's so nice, Anne-Marie, can you make me another one? You probably need several rounds of making that cake before it's perfected. And similarly, after you learn all of these teachings about, you know, apply compassion, develop your empathy, all these aspects that are a bit more on the emotional side, that takes practice to slowly, finally finesse it from the worldly meaning to the Buddhist meaning. And sometimes you may not see yourself change straight away, but as long as you keep trying, over a longer period of time, when you reflect back, you might then be able to see, I have improved. I would have reacted in this way to this person, but now I don't. Or I would have had this emotion arise, or this anger, or this negativity arise, but now I don't. However, to expect yourself to learn the Dharma and hear it and then be able to apply it straight away, that's actually a mismatch with reality, because we're conditioned to a lot of our worldly emotions. So that's why we will always keep telling you, keep practicing, keep practicing. So just remember, learning something and then being able to apply it and to refine it to the way the Buddha intended you to be able to apply it takes practice and time.
Well, thank you.
Like rhythmic breathing is a real savior, I think.
I actually have, I just want to go back to one point. So in terms of empathy, there's the technical terms for it. So there's affective and cognitive empathy. So that's the terms they use in the literature. So affective is the one where you feel what other people, what their feelings are. It's almost like a mirroring. And cognitive is you actually recognize what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And I think the cognitive one is probably the one that's a lot more conducive to compassion in your practice. So
I agree with you.
So those are the two terms you want to keep in mind. And there's, because I remember coming across these two terms and they kind of made it clear, like these two types of empathy. So, and I actually want to ask a question about the Heart Sutra. So when it's in your translation, when it says perfection of wisdom, is that an explicit reference to the Prajnaparamita literature as opposed to just a general concept of perfection of wisdom?
When you're, where are we here? Okay. The perfection of wisdom, which paragraph? Down here, therefore, know the perfection of wisdom?
Just in general, because it does.
It's referring to the, not just this sutra, but
or the body of literature. That's
the body of literature, the whole thing that the literature is talking about.
Okay.
The paramita, the parami, that is talking about the profound perfection of wisdom is to see, is the practice of meditation and everything else that brings about transformation. So it's not just talking about the sutras. It's not just talking about this particular sutras. In practicing the profound perfection of wisdom, it is that particular kind of meditative practice, the threefold practice. Does that answer you what you're saying?
Yeah, so it's referring more to the concept and the practice rather than just the body of literature.
No, yeah, more than just the body of literature, because the body of literature is about the practice itself, the insight itself.
Because I mean, at least my greater question is, I mean, it's short, but you kind of have to do a lot of study before you can actually understand what the concepts is referring to. So you have to be familiar with the Prajnaparamita. You have to be familiar with the Abhidharma system, the 5 aggregates.
Well, you don't have to be familiar with the Abhidharma system as such, because that's quite an extraordinary study.
Yeah.
But you do need to understand what the 5 aggregates are, the 12 bases are, the 4 noble truths are. You need to know what those are, but you do not have to understand the whole Abhidharma system. You don't have to really understand the Sarvastivada because although this seems to be a counter argument to the Sarvastivada, because in daily life, most people think everything really exists.
True.
But you do have to study it. And that's one reason I think it's good to chant it in your own language. One problem is, I know when I was a monk in Korea, and then when I was a layman in Korea, we would, in these, as I've mentioned before, we would begin all these sessions, religious services and other meetings with the Heart Sutra. And we would chant Mahapanya Paramilta Shim Gyongwanja Chebo So Heng Chimpanya Paramilta. That's not Korean. That is the Korean pronunciation of the Chinese character, the Hansha. So the benefit of reciting or chanting the Heart Sutra so that it begins to sink into your head is kind of lost, because it's best to chant it or to recite it in your own language so that it begins to sink in. When we were doing it in Korea, they've now changed it, I understand. They're chanting it in Korean. But we were chanting the Chinese pronunciation of the Korean character, of the Korean pronunciation of the Chinese characters. We weren't getting the benefit of the message of the Heart Sutra going into our heads.
Michael, I have a quick comment on that, just to share something with everybody. I'm also one of those, and have been for a number of years, one of those daily Heart Sutra chanters, and I really take to heart, no pun intended, your point around chanting this in your own language. And actually, a while back, I came across a really, really nice version of the Heart Sutra that I put in the chat box to share with everybody. Actually, I just shared that with Faye instead, but I'll share this now with Faye and everybody. I had the wrong option selected.
Okay.
Yeah, it's basically, it's a version of the Heart Sutra that's sung in an a cappella style, which is quite unique. And the translation is based off of the Plum Village, the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition. So if anybody is interested to kind of dive into it and to kind of chant the Heart Sutra in one's own language, I think that's a really great version that one can start to work with.
Yeah. Very, very good. Let me see if I can copy that. Okay, that's a very good contribution. I do think it is important. The important thing about Buddhist devotions is that, and including the Heart Sutra, however you go about doing that, is not, you want to prevent it from becoming a kind of an automatic ritual. It has to be done so that it is meaningful. When it becomes just kind of rote, then it loses its purpose, loses its meaning, and is really of no value. So you want to do these things, you want to put this somewhere into your daily routine and do it so that the message of what you're chanting, what you're reading, what you're meditating on really gets through and helps transform you and brings you greater happiness in your life.
I have one question.
Yes.
Is it true that it's helpful to become a little bit detached from your own suffering? Because as human beings, we experience suffering all the time. That some of it, part of managing it is to, kind of go with it, but not completely go with it, kind of be detached a bit.
You don't want to get entangled. You want to in order to deal with it, you need to be able to understand the causes and conditions of what is creating the suffering. And you need to do that without getting emotionally entangled in it. So in that sense, you become detached. Detached doesn't mean ignoring or denying or anything like that. It just means not getting emotionally involved, entangled. So you do need to put some space in there so you can see clearly what is going on.
All right.
Somebody else.
I think we're out of time, so.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.